Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Calley, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications, and I want to say thank you to our sponsor of the program, Consumers Credit Union. Check them out at consumerscu.org. So, Brian, kind of a big day. The Supreme Court is hearing the minimum wage paid sick leave case today. Why don't you remind everybody a little bit about this case and how SBAM has been engaged in this very important issue?
There's been a long lead up to this point. So this issue started really in 2018, and with a citizens initiative that became law. The law was modified by the legislature at the end of 2018. It was challenged, and an attorney with the Attorney General opinion questioned the actions of 2018. It was challenged in law. It was essentially overturned by the original court of jurisdiction, but then the appellate court found on the side of maintaining the status quo, and now it's made it up to the Supreme Court. So what we're hoping for is that the Supreme Court will uphold the decision of the Court of Appeals. SBAM has been involved with a broader business coalition all the way through. There is an amicus brief that is part of the actions that are happening in the Supreme Court today. So today is a big day where arguments and questioning is happening regarding this case, which has big constitutional implications on balance of power between branches of government. And now, while it's a big day, I do expect we're going to have to wait a while. So we've been engaged. The small business voice has been inserted into this process in the form of an amicus brief. We do expect that it'll be impactful because I think there are 21, 22, 23, something like that, organizations that ended on signing on to this amicus brief. And so I think it's a pretty powerful unifying statement from employers, job providers around the state. And if you look at those who signed on, you'll see it's very small business heavy. So this is a process that the way it plays out is that the court, they hear arguments, they ask questions of the plaintiffs and defendants, and then it goes into a process of consideration and writing of a final decision. And I think that we'll have a number of months probably to wait for that final decision. Probably, if a normal schedule, it wouldn't be till like spring or late spring before we have a decision, at least mid. So what we'll revisit this on Monday when once all of this plays out, and we'll see who tips their hand. Sometimes you can tell by the questioning, get a feel for whose side it was going for more. There are a few of the justices in particular that are really the deciders. It's a closely divided Supreme Court, and those that kind of operate in the middle will be the deciders on this one. I do not expect, whatever the answer is, for it to be unanimous, and we'll revisit this on Monday. I'll give you my impressions after seeing those arguments and reading about those arguments. Who maybe has the upper hand, but we'll have to wait a long time before we find out if I'm right.
All right. All right, let's talk about the presidential primary here in Michigan that's coming up in February. And there was an effort to kind of have the Supreme Court bypass lower courts in making a decision on Donald Trump's ballot access. So can you fill us in on this and let us know what's happened here?
Yeah, this was a case that the implications in terms of ballot access are pretty big. You can't generally, as a write-in candidate, you're probably not going to win an election. And so although I will say that President Biden is attempting a write-in campaign in New Hampshire, decided because New Hampshire moved their primary earlier to be still first, even though Some other states had moved earlier. Originally, the president decided not to seek access to that ballot, but then there's some challengers, and they're afraid that he could actually, maybe not take that state. So, I mean, this is a big deal on who has access to the ballot, whose name appears on the ballot. And there was a lawsuit that was filed in order to block access from Donald Trump for Michigan's ballot, and it's got a process to go through. The Secretary of State didn't seem to give it a lot of weight, that she wasn't going to take action to block that ballot access, but the plaintiffs are still pursuing it and wanted it to go to the Supreme Court and bypass the steps that you would take, Court of Appeals and then the Supreme Court, because there's just not very much time. Remember, this election is coming up in February, and the Supreme Court decided 6-1 release that decision today, or maybe it was last night, but just released that decision to that they were not going to take up this case ahead of the court, the earlier courts, the original Court of Jurisdiction, the Court of Appeals. They've got to decide, and then the Supreme Court will decide if they want to review those decisions. They will not allow it to be bypassed. And so I think really what that probably means is that the regular ballot process, in terms of, if you collect the signatures, you get on the ballot, you're eligible to run for president, or at least get to win the delegates that come from Michigan. The regular process outside of the courts will probably carry today. I mean, maybe, which means that the Democratic side of the ticket in Michigan, Joe Biden, the Republican side, will feature Donald Trump, and but neither of them will appear alone on the ballot. So both of them being current or former presidents will not have the luxury of being unopposed, but certainly those two are the front runners in every single bit of polling that I've seen. So I expect that's probably how it'll turn out, with the Supreme Court deciding not to take it up.
All right, let's talk about our tie here in the legislature. We talked a little bit on other shows about how two mayoral elections resulted in House of Representatives in the House going to be mayor. So now we are at a 54-54 tie here in the legislature, and there are some special elections coming up at the end of January. So how is SBAM going to get involved in these races?
Yeah, we do get involved in elections. We evaluate candidates. We send out questionnaires that match up, that ask candidates about their positions on issues, and we match those up to positions that SBAM takes based on our small business legislative action council, so small business owners that determine positions that our board of directors approves. And we have a lot of very long-standing policy positions or public policy positions, and that's how we measure candidates. It's not based on party. It's not based on the political factors as much as the issues, and then we consider politics after the issues, electability and ability to run a legitimate campaign and all that sort of thing. But really, it starts with the issues, and that process is underway. I mean, normally we would not be doing this right now. We'd be gearing up in the springtime to consider candidates for next August and fall. But we have these two special elections, and those special elections have some pretty big implications. So we will consider, look at, review the candidates who are running for office on both sides of the ticket in both of these elections, and determine whether any are deserving of the seal of approval or an endorsement from SBAM. For those who are watching this too, if you're interested in getting involved in politics, that part of the process, we'd love to have you engaged. The first thing that you can do if you want to get involved is to be a part of our grassroots network. If you're a member of ours, we don't just assume that you want to hear from us about policy. You need to log into your membership profile and sign up to be a part of our grassroots network. That tells us, hey, you're a business owner who wants to hear about politics, wants to at least be informed about politics. But then if you really want to get engaged or involved, there are lots of ways you can do it. One of the most direct ways would be to support our political action committee. So we do endorsements through our political action committee. And then for those that we endorse, we'd like to provide a financial contribution because they've got to send out mailers, in some cases buy TV ads and radio ads and digital ads. So if you're interested or inclined or really want to step off the sidelines and kind of get right in the middle of it, this would be a good way to do it.
I did share the link to our PAC donation page. And if you would rather just email us that you'd like to receive our watchdog and get more involved in our grassroots efforts, you can just email sbam@sbam.org and we'll take care of that for you. All right, so Brian, let's talk a little bit about an analysis of census data. So not new census data, but an analysis of census data and some interesting insights about migration here in Michigan.
Yeah, there's it's interesting how coming out of politics, and I can see with this data in particular, how it would be really easy to tell two very, very different stories about it. But it is telling. It is something I think is really important for policymakers to consider. And one of the reasons why I think the work that is being done by the Growing Michigan Together Council, the Population Commission the government put together, whether the ideas end up making a difference or not, it is the right priority. It's one of our biggest risks for our future is our population decline. Part of that's demographics. Part of it is net outbound migration. And there are two parts of net outbound migration. You have some people moving out, some people moving in. So you want the ones moving out to be as small as you can make it, and the ones moving in as big as you can make it, if population growth is your goal. In Michigan, it definitely needs to be a goal of ours. So looking at census data from 2018 to 2022. So it's a 5-year period, 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22, 5 years. Over that time period, what they looked at is what percentage of people that live in each state were born there. So think about that for a minute. What percentage of people that live in each state were born in that state? In other words, they haven't migrated anywhere. They're originally from there, born there, and they stayed there. And Michigan has the second highest percentage. So 76.3% of people that live in Michigan today were born here. I'm one of those people. I think Sarah, you're one of those people. So that is like the idea that you'd say, oh, that's probably pretty good retention, right? You could tell a retention story out of that data. By the way, there's only one state that has a higher percentage of people that live there that were also born there. That is Louisiana, 77.7%, so about 1.4% higher than Michigan. Every other state has a higher proportion of people living in that state that were not born there. And what the story behind that, it's actually not a story of retention. It is a story of migration and immigration. So states that have lower percentages of people that were living there, that they were not born there, have that because more people have moved there. And that comes from two different sources. There's migration of people within the borders of the United States, so net migration from other states. That's an area that we've really struggled in. We've talked a little bit about this before. We have gained from a few places. We're gaining lately from places like California, New York, Illinois. We're losing to places like Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, Florida. So there's that internal migration is part of it, but then there's also international immigration. And historically, Michigan has been pretty strong in international immigration, but not as much, certainly since the pandemic. But these are pretty important factors when you consider our positioning for growth in the future. So when I first read this data, I thought, boy, if you were in politics, you could use this on either side of it. You could say, wow, look how great Michigan is. People that are born here stay here. And And then you could tell the other story, which is that there's when people aren't looking to move to Michigan, and you can tell by this data. That is, I think if you were to kind of set the politics aside, I think that you could say on either side, there's a certain pride of people in Michigan, and the idea of retention of our citizens is something where I think we do have some real opportunity there, and is something that potentially or perhaps we could point to as a strength. And we can also acknowledge that we are winning the net inbound migration battle. We're losing that. More people are leaving than coming, and it's a real shame because we have public universities that have a lot of students, some of the best and brightest from around the world, and their final destination doesn't end up being Michigan. It's more of a pass-through type of a situation, and those would make great contributors to the Michigan economy to the extent that we could retain more. So pretty interesting data analysis of data that is out, and I think would be pretty informative for the population council as well. Let me touch a little bit on that too. So as we've talked a little bit about the fact that I serve on this council, you've probably seen, some people have seen some articles lately on proposals that are being considered by the council, and a lot of those things that I've seen hit the paper really aren't representative of the work that I mean, there's a lot of people on the council, a lot of things get talked about, but I've not really seen any of the news coverage that's representative of the current kind of discussions that are happening. And it is somewhat of an internal advisory board to state government, and they decide what they're going to release and when they're going to release. So I can't just blurt out all the things. But I thought it would make sense, given that there have been lots of articles based on just things that people speculate, or maybe have a proposal that was shared with the council, and they're considering this, or they're looking at that, or they're going to do this. And most of them are not, actually none of them that I've read are particularly representative of the things that I think are mainly being discussed. And so but I think that body of work, or at least the first stage in it, will be completed here pretty soon. The governor's deadline said December 15th, which is a week from tomorrow. And so there's still actually quite a bit of work needs to be done between now and then. And then at that point, we'll look forward to kind of sharing with everybody the direction that it goes. I can't say right now whether or not the direction, the recommendations of the council will fit well with the interests of small business, but I think there's a decent chance that it will. And so actually there's several parts of that process I'm feeling pretty good about. And there's some other things being discussed I have some concerns about, but ultimately that work, or at least the first stage of that work, will wrap up pretty soon, and we'll look forward to having a robust discussion about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, before we say goodbye to our viewers today, we want to ask a favor of you, and that is to help participate in a survey that the MEDC is conducting to kind of gauge some small business insight. And so Brian, do you want to give a little bit of background there?
Yeah, so I would love, this survey is going to be open for a while, but I would love to have SBAM members engage in the survey a lot, because what ends up happening oftentimes is that like the mature, ongoing small businesses, it's just busy, and like a lot of times don't participate in this sort of thing. So economic developers, they hear a lot from startup interests, they hear a lot from big business, but those in the middle, like our bread and butter, our members tend to be those kind of in the middle, that are established small businesses that are just growing and super busy and have lots of opportunity, and don't really have time to engage in this sort of thing. But in this case, I know that they're looking at reviewing and considering areas, their strengths and their weaknesses, things that are missing. Would love to have the perspective for them to hear a robust and wide perspective from existing small businesses in Michigan on the service offerings that are out there. In its insight that I believe they will take to heart. it's a professional organization that some really good people working there, but how relevant and good their work is depends a lot on how much engagement they get from our community. So if you would take it should only take about 5 minutes or so. Share the link. Take a few minutes. We'll give you other opportunities. We'll remind you again, but why procrastinate? No time like the present to go ahead and get it started. Would love to see them get thousands of responses from small businesses so that they have some really substantial and reliable data about where small businesses find value in the things that the MBDC could do to bring more value to growing the entrepreneurial climate in Michigan.
All right, thanks for tuning in today. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll be back here Monday at 3 o'clock.
Thanks, everybody. See you on Monday.